Welcome. Glad to be back for another conversation that I want to have that I'm hoping will be beneficial and helpful for those who are in the process of a divorce and in the process of a custody case and have some questions about some specific issues. I've titled our conversation today Gatekeepers, Grandparents, Girlfriends, and Boyfriends. And what we're looking at are legal issues within family dynamics that I think are common to a lot of family law cases. They're common to divorces, they're common to paternity cases, they're common to custody modifications. They're common to even family dynamics with that don't involve a custody case or a paternity case. And so they're just issues that I think are common to attorneys and to folks who are living in this world that maybe we don't talk about enough. And we talk a lot about some of those big ticket items, but these are things that I've noticed lately. And if you know me at all, you know that I like to talk about things that I'm seeing and things that I'm observing myself because it's fresh in my mind. So we're going to break our talk down into those three categories. We're going to start with gatekeepers. We're going to talk about gatekeeping issues as it relates to custody. Then we're going to talk about grandparent issues and what grandparents can do, what uh, custodial parents can do. We're going to talk about those things. And then we're going to talk about significant others and boyfriends and girlfriends and how they play into this process of custody when you're talking about it, whether there's a pending custody case or whether there's a custody order in place and you have a new boyfriend, new girlfriend that is coming into the picture. So let's just dive right in. Um, First, I want to just look at the gatekeeping issue, which I think is common to a lot of parental alienation cases, and that's one of the first indicators of a potential problem, which is gatekeeping. Gatekeeping is kind of the canary in the coal mine, so to speak, in that if you are observing one parent who is limiting access and limiting contact in any way, then what you're observing is gatekeeping behavior. And so it can be as simple as we don't have time to talk right now. It can be as simple as they're not going to have their iPad at my house. They can keep it at your house because I don't want them calling you anytime they want to. It can be as significant as I'm not going to let you see the kids this weekend. And so we're talking about a continuum and a range when we talk about gatekeeping behavior that I think is a first indicator that we may have a problem. And that's why you need to be sensitive to it as you're navigating your custody case and make sure that you are identifying it, that you're notifying your counsel, and that if necessary, you're addressing it head on quickly. Because the quicker you can address these things, the earlier you can address them, the better the outcome could be. I want to also highlight that there is a difference between gatekeeping behavior that's necessary and positive, and there's gatekeeping behavior that is negative. And they sometimes can overlap in a way that we don't necessarily anticipate. And so I think that that's one of the things that I think a lot of people get hung up on, and they may miss the forest for the trees, and they call their attorney and they feel like, okay, that they're cutting off access. What do I need to do? Well, when did you call them? Well, I called them at 7 o'clock, and she wouldn't let me answer. Well, what were they doing when you called? Well, they were at dinner. They were at Outback Steakhouse having dinner, and she wouldn't let me talk to them. They were right there. They were at the booth with them. Okay, well, maybe they needed to finish dinner first. That's not bad gatekeeping behavior. That's just practical common sense gatekeeping behavior. We will finish dinner. We will finish bath time. We will finish homework time, and then we'll call you back. However, if the gatekeeping behavior is such that, okay, we have a scheduled time in our custody order, we're supposed to have phone time at 5:30 p.m. every other day, and we can FaceTime. And those FaceTimes never happen, and they never occur, and the calls go unanswered, and they're never returned. That's negative gatekeeping behavior. And so that that's what we're talking about when we talk about negative and positive. There are some protective behaviors as well that are good that a parent may want to say, okay, look, I'm a little concerned about an issue, and we're going to talk about boyfriend girlfriend issues here in a minute and how this all relates. But there may be a situation where they say, I'm hearing about this situation and I don't really know anything about it, and I'm concerned. So, can you elaborate? That's a better way of handling it than to just flat out say, the kids aren't coming until you tell me what's going on with this person. Those are gatekeeping behaviors that can go both ways. And so um, you should consider not all gatekeeping is a bad thing. Not, sometimes it's just necessary for parenting. If two parents were in the same household, there would be gatekeeping behavior that would continue when those kids are with them. The parents would not allow all things to the kids to have access to all things, or all things to have access to their kids. If they did, they wouldn't be very good parents. And so, not all gatekeeping is a bad thing, but when it starts to prevent a relationship or um, to cause difficulty in having a relationship between a parent and a child, then it becomes a problem. Um, let's talk about court intervention. And the one of the things that I really encourage when we're talking about gatekeeping, I really encourage parents to text as much as possible. Um, iMessage, our family wizard, old fashioned SMS text message, whatever it needs to be. But make sure there's a written account, a dialogue that's recorded when we're talking about those relationships between parents and the children, between the parents. So, for example, I want to talk to my kids. I need to send a text message to their mom before I talk to them and say, hey, I'd love to jump on the phone with them. Are they available? That's better than calling and calling and calling and calling until someone picks up. Okay. So, in both examples, there's a little bit of gatekeeping there. Mom can say, no, they're not available right now, or yes, they are available right now. But how I handle it also comes into play, because if I just cavalierly just say, I'm ready to talk to him, I want to talk to him now, why aren't you answering? Well, then I'm the problem, not the gatekeeper, me. So when you're talking about gatekeeping behavior, make sure that you are doing it, that you're watching your role in this. Don't continuously call until they answer. I I know, if you've dealt with it, you know what I'm talking about. If you've been guilty of it, stop. But there are lives that are happening on both ends of that telephone. And when you're ignoring what's happening on the other end, then you are the problem. You're part of the problem, at least. And so be very mindful of how you're approaching your communication so that you're not the person who, you know, is the one who gets in trouble. And so that's a start. So I recommend communicate via text, via iMessage. Make sure to ask, are they available for a call? Then you've got a record. I tried to reach them 7 o'clock on Wednesday night. Then the other party has an opportunity to say, we're taking baths right now. We'll call you in 30 minutes. That's success. That's successful co-parenting. And so um, that's what we're looking at. Now, let's get forward. When we have gatekeeping behavior that's negative, it's preventing a relationship with the kids, it's in violation of a court order. your mechanism for that, traditionally, legally speaking, is a motion to enforce the order. Um, that would be the probably the knee jerk reaction for most people. I'm a little bit more conservative. I'm not one to just jump on a motion to enforce right off the bat. And so if a client were to come to me and say, this person is not letting me talk to the kids like we're supposed to in the court order via FaceTime, or this person is not giving me my midweek dinner visit. I don't get those things. Um, and I try. I have communicated. I have said, where can I meet you to pick them up, or can I pick them up at school, or that she's told the school not to let me pick them up. If those things are happening, my suggestion would be to start with a letter. If they have counsel, it's very easy. Have your attorney send their attorney a letter that says these things are occurring. They need to be corrected, because then you've given the other side an opportunity to fix what the issues are before going to the courthouse to do it. And judges love that. Okay. You're going to want to give them an opportunity to correct the issue and act in good faith before you go down and file something. If you're always the first one to file and you're always the one to just run to the courthouse, it's going to backfire on you at some point. It may work the first couple of times, but at some point it's going to start, people are going to start to say, look, you need to maybe work with her a little bit better. Maybe you need to work with him a little bit better so that there's a better understanding of what's happening here. This wasn't an intentional uh, thing that he or she is doing. So motions to enforce are available, and you're going to want to get those on file if necessary. If there's been no um, correction to the bad activity, you're going to want to get to the courthouse. You're going to have a hearing on the enforcement. If you have no communications in writing, you're not going to be as successful. But if your communications with the other side are on Our Family Wizard, or they're via text message, and you can point to them and say, here's my exhibit that shows I tried to call at this time, no answer. I asked if I could talk to them at this time, no response. I asked if I could talk to them at this time, no response. Those are things that you're going to want to look at. Those are the precursor on a motion to enforce before we get into motions to modify, which are going to be the most significant request if you have a gatekeeper that just won't change. Um, if you get to the point where phone calls that go unanswered end up being visitation that goes uh, un unhad, and you get to a place where the exchanges aren't occurring, you're showing up at the exchange point and he or she doesn't show up, or you're coming to the house and nobody's answering the door. Those are things that you want to probably, there's not going to be a lot of opportunity to negotiate around those things, but I would probably the first time give them an opportunity. I think giving them an opportunity and saying, my visitation was supposed to happen on Friday, but the kids were gone when I went to school to pick them up. What is the story? What happened and why? And when can I get my makeup time? That's an easy letter, and it shows the court that you are a parent who's not just hauling off and filing things. You're trying to work with the other parent. Everybody has lives, everybody has things. It may have been that mom just forgot that it wasn't her weekend. It may have been that she thought it was the 8th and it was really the 14th. So these are things that you need to consider in the moment before you just haul off and fire off something. Be reasonable in terms of your approach. And so, but once you have been reasonable, then do not hesitate. Go file your motion, get in front of a judge, and explain to the judge what's occurring and ask for a remedy. Ultimately, what everybody in this system, whether the system is good, bad, or broken, we're all trying to solve the problems that are presented to us every day. And judges that's what they're there for. They're there to help solve the problem when attorneys can't get it resolved between them. And usually attorneys can't get it resolved because they have clients that can't get it resolved. So in the end, you got to have an umpire who's going to call balls and strikes. And so we're all trying to get to that point. So don't hesitate to go to the judge and say, Judge, this is what happened. This is what was supposed to happen. And this is what I would like to see happen from here. And that's ultimately what you want to do. Some of you may have provisions for mediation or parenting coordinators in your custody order if you have a custody order in place. Um, don't hesitate to utilize it. If you have a mediation provision, it's going to heighten your need to try to come to an alternative resolution before going to the courthouse. And so those are things that you can do. Check the box, try to fix it. If you have attorneys that are involved that really want to try to see these people get their custody order figured out and co-parent, that you're gonna be just fine if you want to do the same. But if you're the type of person just doesn't want to agree with the other side and you have an attorney that's going to facilitate that, then you're going to end up at the courthouse for the rest of your child's minor years. So just get ready for it. Um, I I I think that as we look at gatekeeping, um, as it relates to themes that you see regarding parental alienation, it's typically um, your first indicator that you're going to have an issue. As I said earlier, um, if you have a restrictive gatekeeper and they are making it very difficult for co-parents to parent, then it's going to create problems that you need to fix right off the bat. Um, so gatekeeping behaviors are common, and they can be positive, they can be negative, they can be practical. They're not something that you need to always look at and say that's a bad thing, but you do need to be mindful of it. And so, if I could convey to any co-parent advice on how to handle gatekeeping, I would suggest first treat the other parent as you would want them to treat you. That's the first rule of co-parent fight club. But if the other parent won't work with you and will not facilitate that dynamic, then you've got to document the what's happening and give them an opportunity to correct it. It's much easier for attorneys to walk into a courtroom and say, Judge, my client has given them an opportunity to correct it and they've refused to do so. Because then at that point, you can point to their behavior and know that it's overt. They're intentional with what they're doing. This isn't something where they're just ignorant of what they're required to do. They know what they're required to do and they're choosing not to. And that's different than, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I didn't know that's what I was supposed to do. So you want to document those things early on and do not be afraid to go to the courthouse. So those are things when you're dealing with gatekeeping behavior, that's kind of where you're at with it. Now, you ultimately, if the gatekeeping continues and this thing ends up where we've been at the courthouse once or twice already on this, file your motion to modify custody, see what the court wants to do, because if you're not able to exercise your time and you're not able to be the parent that you want to be because of the other parent's behavior, then that needs to be remedied, and judges need to uh, remedy that. And one of the remedies is to give you custody. One of the remedies in this situation is to expand your time and give you more time. So one of the things that, before I get off the gatekeeping issue, I wanted to point out, there's a academic term that I've used in briefing up parental alienation cases that's really spot on, and I think you start to see it with gatekeeping issues, but then it expands from there, and that's emotional security theory. Emotional security theory, and what you're getting at with that in general, and I'll let you go deep dive it if you want to, but it's a very applicable academic theory, psychological theory as it relates to conflict between parents and the impact it's having on children. And so if you are a child growing up in a home where mom and dad live apart but you don't observe a lot of conflict. And you know, dad's going to take me to mom's, and mom's going to take me to dad's, and we're going to see each other, and they're going to get along. They live in different homes, but they get along. That's going to have a much more positive uh, impact on that child than the opposite. And the opposite is where emotional security theory comes into play. Children are impacted by the conflict that they're observing when they see that mom or dad is either afraid of the other parent, that they are um, not willing to work with the other parent. There's something there that is creating a sense of conflict that those parents are having to deal with. Um, I have briefed this issue up on emotional security as it relates to motions to modify custody, motions to enforce a custody agreement, motions to change child placement. If you are interested in this issue and you'd like to see my briefing, I'm happy to share it. Um, I don't think that there's anything in it that's it's a secret, but you do have to go through and deep dive and find the resources and put the articles together and then present it in such a way that within a brief that it looks like it's something that a judge will read and feel comfortable reading as it relates to this case. And so um, I think it's really important that everyone out there who's dealing with alienating behaviors, gatekeeping behaviors, or things that are impacting their relationship with their children, that they understand all of the psychological issues that may be at play. And that's just one of them in emotional security theory. And so um, you can email me and I'll be happy to share that portion of the briefing with you if you would like. Um, Second issue that I want to talk about is grandparents' rights. Grandparents, and the reason this is front of mind is because I think that in the United States, especially today, we're seeing more and more and more grandparents raising children. And we're seeing more and more grandparents who are dealing with their children being divorced and how that impacts them. And the grandparents are man, I just feel for these are baby boomers who are now the grandparents who are have raised their kids, and a lot of them are raising the grandkids and sometimes great grandkids, and they're they have questions. And then the flip side of that is that the parties, the parents of children have questions as to what they can do with their parents, what their parents can do for them, because it sometimes gets used against parties in cases that their parents are so involved. And so I want to talk about that real quick. Um, I'm gonna I'm gonna be talking from the perspective of Oklahoma and how it applies in Oklahoma versus other states. Every state has their own law as it relates to grandparents' rights, and there are some states that do not have a grandparents' rights law. Some states have it on the books. Their courts have overturned it. For purposes of our conversation, I'm going to use Oklahoma as my template, and then you just have to determine where you're at from there. Um, in Oklahoma, you've got to have a triggering event that gives the grandparents the right to come in and ask for something. So, where let's imagine that um, we're representing or we're dealing with grandparents who want to see their grandkids and they're not getting to. They are they're not. I'm not talking about guardianship or conservatorship, different thing. I'm talking and I'm not talking about adoption. I'm talking about the grandparents want to see their grandkids, but they're not being allowed to. Uh, 20 years ago, feels like 20 years ago. This one of my first, if it may have been my first family law trial, was a grandparent visitation case. And as a young attorney, I didn't know come here from Sikkim, and I had a very good judge who made sure uh, to have me brief my law. And what I've learned from that experience is two things. One, the first thing is always brief your law. Know what your law says. Know what your local statutes say as it relates to grandparent issues, because everything relating to grandparents stems from that statute. Um, Second thing is you never know what's going to happen in a grandparent case. In that case, we had a deceased. My client was the grandmother of a deceased. Her daughter deceased. She was the mother of a child, and that child had a really close relationship with grandma, and grandma had been in the home, living in the home while the mother was sick. And the when the mother died, the father stopped all contact with mother's side of the family. Um, so my client filed the grandparent petition, and we ended up trying that case. And in the end, the judge sided with us and said because of the relationship that the grandmother had with the child, having lived in the home for as long as she had and having acted as a caretaker for that child, then she met the burden, and visitation was ordered. She got, I think, if I recall correctly, I think she got to see the child maybe once a month, and then quarterly he would come out and visit her. That was what was ordered. Within just no time, um, Dad had changed his mind, and what I'll say is, in the end, grandmother had much more of a relationship with that child than she ever dreamed when we started that case. And so you never know where a case is going to go in the beginning. And so, as I tell grandparents all the time, this is such a delicate dynamic that if you once you get started and you get into it, a lot of times the things evolve, and there's opportunity to see an outcome that you don't anticipate in the beginning, because we're dealing with such interesting dynamics. Um, but back to the elements in Oklahoma, at least, you have to have a triggering event. And so, what I'm going to say is, one of the parents have to be deceased. Parents have to be determined unfit. There's a divorce that has occurred. Um, those are things that you are required to. First of all, those things have to happen. If you've got two parents that are still married, living together with their children, and they just don't want their mom or dad to see the kids, they have that prerogative. They have that discretion to do that. Um, that's it's hard to tell grandparents that that's the case, but it is. What you have to be able to show too as grandparents in most situations is that if that contact with the child is not ordered by the court, it's detrimental to the child. The child's not going to be as well off as they would be if the visitation were ordered. Um, Child would be harmed if they don't have a relationship with their grandparents. Um, that's where you really want to stress, and this is what I tell a lot of parents that they want to know, okay, well, what's reasonable with grandparents, and then I tell grandparents the same thing. Grandparents, you want to have as much time in relationship with that child while you can, as much as you can. Be the babysitter. Let the parents go to dinner. Let the kids stay over for the weekend. Do those things that build the relationship with the kids while you can. And then, if something were to happen, the there's an argument that the relationship is there in such a way that if you take that relationship away, it's going to be detrimental to the kids. I hope that makes sense. I think that essentially you just tell grandparents, try to keep those kids as much as you can. Parents, let the grandparents keep them as much as you can. And if hopefully the marriage lasts because there's more babysitting and more date nights. So that's what we'll pray for anyway. Um, so from a grandparent perspective, you are you're limited by your statute locally, but you do have the opportunity to come in if you can show the relationship and you can show that there is a it'd be better for the kid to have or kids to have a relationship with you. You're going to have a pretty good argument, and don't let anybody tell you you aren't. I mean, there's a theory out there that grandparent cases are just you just don't do them, and some people just don't. I think I prefer I love a good grandparent case because I think that every child I wish every child was as lucky as I was, as lucky as my kids have been to have good relationships with their grandparents, and so um, that's a good thing. You now I kind of want to switch a little bit to grandparents who are involved in the party's case post filing of a divorce. And what I mean, here's the scenario: mom and dad have been married, they're divorcing, and let's say both of them have parents who are helping, or maybe one of them has parents who are helping a lot with helping around the house with the kids, those things. Typically, what I'll see is that's a really that everything works well for a while. People are, it's not that big of a deal until one of the parties needs it to be a big deal and wants to use it against the other one. And so if you are working 8 to 5 and kids school starts at 9 o'clock and you have a grandparent who helps deliver the children to school at 9 o'clock, well, that's not a bad thing. Kids get to see their grandparents. It's all fine and dandy. But then when the other side needs something, wants something that you're not willing to give, they might say, well, you know what? Since you can't get the kids to school on time, I think I want custody and I want that time. Well, that's what we're seeing. I mean, we see that kind of thing on a regular basis, and it's juvenile, um, but it's a reality. And so, what I like to suggest is that again, grandparents who were involved in the children's lives before the divorce, who continue to be involved in the children's lives post divorce, are only doing what has been the status quo, which was when you need a grandparent to step up and help around the house or help with the kids or help with these things. And this can be applied to aunts and uncles and any extended family that has been doing these things. They're not doing anything other than assisting where they can, and that's what families are for. And we don't want to forget that, when the old saying, it takes a village to raise a child, those are things there's a reality to that. And having grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins and whoever it may be that steps in should never penalize someone who is trying to do everything they can to provide for and support their family. And so, um, but you need to be mindful of that because I do get calls a lot from grandparents or from kids who are going through the divorce who want to know, hey, my mom has been helping me a lot with the kids. Um, she doesn't get paid for it. She's volunteering for it, but now other side is saying they don't want that to continue to happen. Why? I mean, why is grandparent not good enough to watch your children? Wouldn't that make more sense than to put them into daycare or something like that? And so, I really hope that everybody will understand that grandparents in today's society. Why wouldn't we encourage those relationships as much as we can, given the fact that relationships seem to be so hard to come by anymore? And so, if we can encourage those grandparent relationships with kids and encourage parents to work together and to work with those grandparents on both sides, how much healthier would that situation be long term. And that's what I hope we can start seeing more of that. Um, Healthy situations sometimes include significant others, and so we're now to the, I guess some might say the fun part with the new boyfriends, new girlfriends, post filing, post divorce. Let me just say, if you scoured at my blog and our website, I for years I think I've had a post on our website, um, and I know that it's in our guidebook on our website at some point that um, I've recommended that parties don't hesitate to date if you want to while your divorce is pending. That's been something that I've said in writing, and from a legal perspective, um, I don't know anyone who would probably tell you that um, you're wrong in doing that. Um, but I will say this: I have changed my tune on that, and I think that it for the kids' sake, exposing them to a significant other too early is not a good thing. It's a in my mind, it's a selfish thing that you're prioritizing your own desires over those of the children. And so I really would encourage from a parenting perspective that folks hold hit the brakes on the new paramour, hit the brakes on the new boyfriend, hit the brakes on the new girlfriend, being around the kids until the kids have adjusted to the fact that mom and dad are no longer in the same home. And if you do that, I think in the end, um, things will work out better for everybody. The that there's no I don't know of any reason why new boyfriends, new girlfriends should be around kids while a divorce is pending. There's plenty of time to have a relationship away from the children. And so be careful with that. In a lot of divorce cases, there will be a provision in a temporary order preventing that, preventing exposure to significant others. We're seeing that less and less today, I think. I think there's more of a cavalier mentality that no one's going to tell me what I can and can't do. And there's questions as to whether or not it's even constitutional for the court to say whether you can date or not while your divorce is pending. So I think that those are things to keep in mind as you move forward, though, that it would make sense in my mind as a parent to hold off until there's been a real that when the divorce is final, the kids have transitioned into a world where they understand mom and dad are divorced and what that means, especially for younger kids. And so I hope that just practically speaking, folks will consider that as they're moving forward. Now, how do boyfriends and girlfriends impact a divorce proceeding in the courtroom? As I said, most of the time, judges are not going to penalize you for having a boyfriend or a girlfriend after the divorce has been filed. I know that a lot of my faith-based friends, a lot of my Christian friends, had no idea that was the case. They thought, and I do still have clients who adhere to a, a belief that until that divorce decree is in place, you're still married and you still have the same responsibilities as a married party in some capacity. Now, as cases start to drag out and you get 2 or 3 years into a case, that can change. But I think that there are folks who I've represented and work with today that are, they're not going to date until the divorce is over. I think it's great. It eliminates a lot of issues and eliminates a lot of things that you might have to deal with. I mean, who wants to go through two breakups at the same time, which is not uncommon? I'm breaking up with my spouse and I'm breaking up with my boyfriend. And those things can happen at the same time. Not a lot of fun. So be careful there. Make sure that before you start dating, that you understand all of the court orders in place. Make sure that you understand that the temporary order says I cannot expose those kids to a new party. The temporary order says I can't have overnight guests. My divorce decree probably says I can't have overnight guests when the kids are with me. Um, those are considerations that you need to know before you start into a relationship again. That's going to, especially one that it could end up in a significant relationship. Um, as I said earlier, I think the most important topic or element of this conversation is the emotional needs of the children. And this is where guardian ad litems come into play. This is where sensitive judges who are sensitive to this issue, you may not even know it. You may not know that your judge does not like to see people exposing boyfriends to their kids before the divorce is finalized. You may not know that. And so be careful there. But you need to consider the needs of the kids as it relates to the relationship. Children, you read um, any book relating to children going through a divorce, they're looking for validation that they are loved. It's not their fault, and that this is and mom and dad are going to be there. Um, Parents who separate from spouse and immediately start seeing someone else convey that they are more interested in their dating relationship than they are the time with the kids, especially when they're not getting to see the kids very much as it is. And so I want you to be very careful. And if you're going to prioritize dating relationships over the children, um, why are you fighting for custody? That's honestly why. And so be mindful of that as you move forward. Um, Avoid conflicts with the other parent as it relates to new boyfriend, new girlfriend. And what I mean by that is the minute that your new girlfriend is creating conflict with your divorcing spouse, you need to pump the brakes on any exposure to the new girlfriend, boyfriends as well, new boyfriend, whatever it is. If there's too much um, conversation going on, and usually it's like this, the kids are expressing that we went to the movie with so and so and mom, or we went to a basketball game with dad and so, and that perks up. And who are those people? Well, I had no idea those people. And then you've got kids who are starting to wonder what's going on with mom and dad. Like, where you start, there's a soup. It's a soup. And if you can avoid that, avoid it. Um, get your divorce done and go date, go enjoy your life, but get it done. Um, you need to be mindful of your partner's background. This one will bite you quicker than anything, is that you start dating someone that does not have a background that's very healthy for kids. Drug abuse, alcohol consumption, uh, domestic violence, any criminal history, criminal background. These are things that pop up all the time in cases where um, someone is dating someone that has this past history. And typically it goes something like, well, I can't tell you that he's going to do that again, but he's done it before. And so is it smart to start dating someone that has that in their background when I'm trying to litigate my custody case? So it's very frustrating for attorneys, especially when you get a case to the point where you feel like, okay, we're in a place where we can make this work. We can get through this. We can get joint custody. We can get good visitation schedules in place. Everybody walks away winning, and then your client shows up with a new significant other who has 3 VPOs pending, who has a load of issues that they are dealing with in their own custody case, and a background in drug abuse, because then it just all bets are off as it relates to the case, because you've just introduced a bad element into the case that you're trying to put your best foot forward. Why would you do that? And so I want you to be very careful as to who you're dating and who your partners are and the background and evaluation of those things. Um, Do not cohabitate. Do not cohabitate during, especially during your divorce. I think that goes probably without saying, but if anybody has a question as to whether I should move my significant other in prior to the divorce being finalized, I highly recommend against that. Um, you may actually have restrictions in your court order that you can't do that. So be careful. Again, know your court order. My recommendation to you is to keep all relationships private. It would be better for everyone you know to anticipate that you are not dating anyone or to not believe that you're dating anyone. Um, it would be better that no significant other is ever a factor in your custody case. That would be ideal. And so, if you are someone who's going through a divorce or someone who's going through a custody case of some sort, and you are you've met someone, you want to see them again and you want to pursue them, uh, be as clandestine as possible, and do not be, making it, putting it front and center in your divorce case, because it will become front and center if you're not careful. um, make sure that anyone you're seeing, anyone you're dating, anyone that is someone who is going to uh, be someone in your life, understands your relationship with your children, the dynamic there, and make sure that they understand the court order. Do not allow someone to come into the picture who's not going to respect the boundaries of the parent-child relationship. Don't let them spank. That's first and foremost. Do not let your significant other spank your kids. It's a quick way to lose custody of your kids and maybe get CPS involved. Um, do not allow your significant other to take on a parental role. That happens more times than you know, more times than anybody understands. That the significant other, gets moved into the role of, well, this is the spouse I wish I would have had. This is the wife I wish I would have had. This is the dad I wish I would have had. It's the husband. I mean, don't let that happen. Okay, that kids don't want to see that, and it doesn't help your custody case at all. So don't let that happen. Um, courts don't like to see significant others overstepping their bounds and their role. Um, significant others should not. They should know their place in any custody case, and they should understand that they are not father, they are not mother, um, and that if they start overstepping, they need to back off. And a judge will tell them that if need be, lawyer will tell them that if need be. It's a hard conversation to have with your client when your client shows up to your office. They bring their new girlfriend with them, and you have to tell them you've got to get your new girlfriend to just back off. That's not what they want to hear. They're excited, So I'm telling it to you online, so hopefully I don't have to tell it to you in my office. Um, that's the goal. Understand the role, understand boundaries. If you have a guardian ad litem in your case, or if you don't have a guardian ad litem in your case, and there's a significant other you're concerned about, get the guardian ad litem involved. Guardian ad litems can interview these people in ways that lawyers can't, judges can't. They'll get to the bottom of what's going on here. If you have concerns about substance abuse issues, if you have concerns about protective orders and VPOs and domestic violence, um, get a guardian ad litem involved to start interviewing folks and find out who's really going to be around my kids, because that's ultimately what we're talking about here. um, you don't want to mishandle how you handle the significant other on either side. And what I mean by that is this: it can backfire on you if the other party is seeing someone and you're making an issue out of it just because you don't want them seeing someone. Okay, that's just as bad. Okay, they may be doing everything right. They may be keeping that person away from the kids. The kids are not confused by what's happening. The kids understand that mom is mom, dad is dad, And there's no real issue with the fact that mom is dating someone. Well, don't make an issue out of it. Because if you're making an issue out of it, all you're doing is trying to control the dynamic, control her, and vice versa. If mom leaves to go be with boyfriend and then dad starts to date, um, don't make a big deal out of it. Because and not unless the kids are involved, not unless the kids are being impacted, then start asking questions. At that point, it's reasonable to start asking, who is this person? Before that, not, it's probably off limits. But if they're going to be around your kids, don't hesitate to ask. And if you're going to date someone that's going to be around your kids, don't be surprised if you have to answer the question of who they are. So don't date someone you don't want to introduce. Where you meet your significant others matters. And so be mindful of that. Proceed cautiously throughout any relationships, because the people you surround yourself with and the people you spend time with are the people who are going to influence you, and by extension they're going to influence your kids. And kids grow up, and kids understand things better in hindsight. And so be careful that you don't give them something to look back on and say, boy, I didn't realize it at the time, but that was not a good person that dad was with. That was not a good person mom was with. And it was just really bad for us as a family. Be careful of that. Um, I will close with this. The things that the gatekeepers, grandparents, girlfriends, boyfriends, these are all legal issues within family dynamics. And family dynamics is really what we're talking about here. When we're talking about dealing with divorce, we're talking about dealing with paternity cases, custody cases. How is the family going to interact with one another? How does it, because a divorce has a ripple effect throughout the entire family. And if you're not careful, that ripple effect is going to have a very negative impact on the entire family. It's going to have a negative impact on your children. It could have a negative impact on their children and their children's children. And as we talk about gatekeeping and we're talking about time with children, we're encouraging relationships with both parents. You may know that my slogan in our office is both parents matter. And we want to encourage relationships with both parents and both parents' families, because those children are the children of both parents. They need to know both parents. Grandparents are intimately involved more and more and more and more, in ways that we maybe never anticipated, but they're becoming more involved. That's a good thing. If you're blessed enough to have grandparents who are able to be involved in your kids' lives, let them. Do not penalize anyone. Don't penalize the other side because they allow grandma to come in and help. Don't penalize the other side because grandpa gets to go fish. Which reminds me, do not use your right of first refusal to keep the kids from the grandparents. That's another one that I forgot about. Didn't even put in my notes. But be careful not to penalize children for having a relationship with their grandparents. And then, most importantly, step parents matter. Who you marry after the divorce is going to have an incredible impact on your children. The younger, the more significant the impact. And so, children are watching you. They're watching their parents, and they want to emulate their parents. And what they don't want to see is something that's going to be negative for them. And so, as you work through these issues, be very mindful that if you keep children first in terms of the consideration, a lot of these things have a way of working themselves out. You want a relationship with both parents. You want children to have relationships with grandparents. You want, to make sure that anyone that's around your kids is someone who is a stand-up person, is upright, is good and healthy, and is going to add to their life, not take away from their life. And so those are that's why these three things are very important as you navigate this legal framework. Make sure that that's what you're considering as you move forward. If there is anything I can do, any consultations, consulting, um, legal representation, I'm happy to represent people who want to have good relationships with their kids. I want to represent people who are concerned about the well-being of their children and that they are willing to do what it takes to make sure their kids grow up with in healthy family dynamics. That's who I want to represent. If you're one of those people and I can help you, I'm happy to. My email contact information should be on the video. If not, find me. I'm at thesmithfirm.net, and I am happy to talk to anyone that needs some help. Thank you.